गुड इवनिंग एंड वेलकम टू गाना शॉट। गाना शॉट में आप सबका स्वागत है। Today we are going into the next topic and into China. We're going to talk of the Platinum Jubilee of the People's Republic of China and Xi's bluster all about it. And this is a joint webinar of Klaus, Casa, and Ganashot. And for this webinar, I have a truly outstanding panel who know China well. And let me welcome all of them. Uh, Dr. General Gautam Moorthy, uh, Antara
Thank you.
Ghoshal Singh, who's actually a Chinese scholar, if I have seen one. General Rakesh Sharma, who's commanded a corps uh, across the LAC or on side of the LAC. I wouldn't say across. Across is the
Across.
other across this side of the LAC, and Professor Shrikant Kondapalli, who's another renowned Chinese scholar, and you must all read his article today. Okay, today we're going to talk about what has happened. I wouldn't say what has happened. Take the landmark of this platinum jubilee of the People's Republic of China, which was celebrated on 1st of October. And on that day, Xi Jinping, with his usual bluster, gave out a lot of a big speech. And if I recount the highlights of that speech, he spoke of the remarkable achievements of China, the kind of modernization it has achieved, what it has contributed to the noble cause of peace and development of humanity. He said it's a very strong country, and he spoke of the rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. He spoke of the greatness of the one system, one country, two systems they're following, handling Hong Kong. And then he expressed his resolute opposition to Taiwan independence. And then in the end, he spoke of advancing the Global Development Initiative, the Global Security Initiative, and the Global Civilizational Initiative as part of his Sinocentric world order. Right? Having said that, if you look at China today, there are two faces to China. One, there is a huge external posturing which talks of new productive forces, it talks of huge exports, it talks of technology, it talks of space, quantum, AI, cyber, electronic vehicles, solar systems, and batteries which are flooding the world market. There's a military buildup which is ceaseless, right? Despite the fact that huge purges are going on in PLA and mostly due to corruption. The last one was done day before yesterday, right? And the external posturing remains. But internally, China is bleeding, and China is bleeding very heavily. It's been caught in a deflationary spiral, uh, which I've not seen, at least in the recent past, ever since the reforms and opening started, right? And that is despite the stimulus which was carried out recently. In fact, if anything, the effect after the first 3 4 days seems to be going back into a downslide, right? And it has a population decline which is irreversible, for which it is ill prepared. And that's how China is today. But before I conclude one way or the other, one has to remember a historical fact of China. And this historical fact is that, irrespective of what everything else was, whenever China was internally weak, it was externally dangerous. And this is history which we have experienced. In 1962, when China invaded India, China was in the grip of a famine, of the Great Leap Forward. And this was actually the Great Leap Forward started with the Korean War, when it went to war with uh, you know America or US forces in Korea. And they continued to be problematic to the whole world during the entire period of the Cultural Revolution. This is the history. So as China weakens, the danger resurfaces, the way I look at it. But then that's my view. We have four members who are very well versed in Chinese issues, and I'll defer the floor to them to speak their mind out on whatever they feel about Xi's bluster, the 75th anniversary of the People's Republic of China, or whatever. The first, I will request General Gautam Moorthy to tee off. Sir, all yours. Please take your 10 to 12 minutes. I'll not stop you. And after that, that's for everyone. If time permits, we'll go through a second round. Otherwise, we'll take questions and we'll see how this discussion goes. General Gautam Moorthy, sir, all yours.
Thank you, General Shankar. Good evening to you. Good evening to my fellow panelists. And good evening to your viewers. I'm actually humbled to be on this panel today because General Shankar has made it his life's mission to study China in great detail. And he's been doing so, writing some wonderful articles and speaking on China, at least for the last 5 to 6 years, and has been doing it in great detail. Antara, a young scholar with new ideas. I've heard her speak also once in China. Absolutely brilliant. General Rakesh Sharma commanded the corps, and he knows the operational and the military aspects of China more than anyone else. And of course, Professor Shrikant Kondapalli is our mentor, so to speak, on China, and he's been writing and speaking. I've been hearing him since the year 2006 in the NDC when I heard him for the first time on China, and there is no better panel than this. So humbly, I'll put my 2 pennies worth before the panel. And all I'll say is that, as General Shankar brought out, China is, despite Xi's bluster, is facing huge domestic and international pressures. You know, he has highlighted, of course, apart from all that, he has also highlighted the risks and challenges ahead in his talk. And he included a lengthy segment on the unification with China. And this speech and these celebrations, which are supposed to be huge, has passed with very minimal fanfare. He spoke of stormy seas preparing for rainy days. So the speech itself, apart from what General Shankar said, it contained 4 points that we must note. First is that, as General Shankar brought out, he sees a rapid economic development and long-term social stability. And this, they believe, is the 2 main pillars of their legitimacy. But as we all know, both these pillars are now very shaky, and their possibility of their collapse cannot be ruled out. In fact, Professor Kondapalli has brought this out in some of his articles earlier. General Shankar has also brought this out. This focus on modernization that General Shankar mentioned took up a substantial portion of his speech, and he wants all to adhere to the leadership of the CCP. But the CCP, we all know, is under his total and complete control. The third prominent feature of his speech was a space dedicated to Taiwan. Taiwan, as we all know, is traditionally mentioned in all addresses, the National Day speeches, etc., etc. It remains central to the country's conception of itself. This year, he dedicated nearly 10% of his entire speech was dedicated to Taiwan. And what is striking, every time they used to talk about peaceful means for reunification, there was no mention of it this time. Not one word for peaceful means for reunification. That tells you something. The fourth and final notable part of the speech, which came shortly before the end, was an invocation to prepare for what, and I will quote, unpredictable risks and challenges. He has warned that the country must be prepared for danger in times of peace. And this, I think, was he himself realized that his bluster went too far. And I think it is reflective of a lack of confidence in the the rung of leadership that he is presiding over. Perhaps Professor can explain more to us on this. And that perhaps also explains why the National Day celebrations were muted. In fact, they try to pass it off as once in 5 years it'll be muted, once in 10 years it'll be in done in great style. China, General Shankar has brought out quite adequately. The economy is grappling with a significant downturn. Primarily, it is stemming from the lingering effects of the COVID-19 pandemic and the troubled real estate sector. The government has introduced several initiatives aimed at revitalizing the economy, such as reducing interest rates, easing mortgage requirements. But I think we are skeptical because they have not addressed the deeper structural issues. General Shankar mentioned the aging population. There's also declining consumer spending, and these exacerbate their economic woes. There is a lot of discontent among the younger generation. Now, this hardly comes out because we all know China is a very closed society. They have felt disillusioned with the promises of prosperity. In fact, there have been two surveys on Chinese attitudes towards the economy. One found that people were growing pessimistic and disillusioned. The other survey showed a record of protests, both physical and online. And online protests, the moment they come up, they keep taking it down. Now, these anxieties are reflected in the choices made by the young people. You have to look at the young people to understand China. Don't look at Xi and his bluster. The young people are telling you unemployment is on the rise. Millions of college graduates are forced to accept low-wage jobs, while others have embraced what they call, within inverted commas, a lie flat attitude, which is their way of pushing back against the relentless work that they expected to do. And some have opted to be full-time children, again, returning home to their parents because they can't find a job or they're completely burnt out. Now, if your viewers may recollect, General Shankar, that we had discussed this earlier also about the children who are looking after not only their parents, but because of good diet and medical facilities, etc., they're looking after two sets of parents and grandparents. So there are these full-time children who are sitting at home and just doing this and in one apartment because the real estate has crashed. And economically, China is not in such a good place as they are making it out to be. As far as political stability and control is concerned, I think the professor will shed light on it. But Xi's style has been to continue to consolidate power and ensure party loyalty. We have seen the kind of purges that are going on, as General Shankar mentioned even one day before yesterday. Whoever is disloyal, corrupt, now you can hang a guy on anything because the kind of courts of law that they have is quite different from a proper court of law. And Xi's biggest fear, and we've discussed this before, is he has studied the collapse of the Soviet Union. That haunts him, and he is not willing to take a chance of their ideological moorings to get loose. So their emphasis is on bringing stability, and this has led, and the stability is through hard repression. And therefore, your domestic security budgets are going up. There's facial recognition, cameras all over the place. And any unrest or any kind of protest is sort of taken very, very seriously. Censors have been cracking down on all kinds of frustration that is being expressed. I've mentioned that vocal online posts are being taken down. Influencers are being blocked on social media for flaunting any luxurious taste. And let us not forget the queues outside luxury stores in Paris, London, Bangkok are all Chinese. Most of them are Chinese. State media defends the bans as a part of an effort to create civilized and healthy and harmonious environment. Last week, there was a top economist who has been arrested, a person called Xu Jinping, because he criticized Xi's handling of the economy. So the Chinese Communist Party is trying to control the narrative by shaping what information people have access to or what is perceived by negative as negative. Now, it's not good in a society because the actual difficulties and problems then don't come up. Maybe a local problem of some sewage or some water problem in a in a particular locality. Maybe that's about all that you can bring up to the authorities, and that also not so much as a complaint, but to say that please help out. This is the problem we are facing, but nothing with their policies you can talk about as a Chinese citizen. Conflicts on the security front, he faces escalating tensions over territorial disputes. We have, in fact, held a whole webinar on Chinese territorial disputes, South China Sea, Taiwan, border issues with India. On Eastern Ladakh, General Rakesh Sharma will speak about, and Arunachal. So I'll leave that out. But his commitment to reunification with Taiwan remains a top priority, with military force being a potential option. Now, this stance heightens his tensions with the United States, which supports Taiwan's defense. But at the same time, the US is busy with Ukraine, with their own internal elections, internal contradictions, and with the Israel Hamas war and Hezbollah, and now with Iran coming into the picture. So it's a huge problem, but China is looking at a window right now, and more on that later by my fellow panelists. So Xi's bluster basically said there are no difficulties that can stop the Chinese people from moving forward. Although he said you prepare for danger, road ahead will not be smooth, there will be difficulties and obstacles we may encounter. And major tests such as, and he quoted, high winds, rough seas, or even stormy waves. So he's preparing his people for something. Because these kind of words are picked up by Chinese, by scholars who understand China, like the professor. And Professor will tell us more about it. So, in conclusion, all I'll say is that voices from inside and outside the PRC have made very critical and troubling assessments of the country's current condition. In fact, one blog by a prominent PRC-based writer published an article that made an analogy of the current moments with the collapse of the Ming dynasty. Now, just imagine one person has written that, but I do not know whether that article still exists, but he has compared the current condition to the collapse of the Ming dynasty. Earlier, explosive growth had turned China into a global power. It was stable. Stability and prosperity was a carrot which was offered by the regime, which would never lose its grip on the stick. However, the slowdown hit as the pandemic ended, and partly driven by 3 years of sudden and complete lockdowns, it strangled economic activity. Added to that is Xi's policy. So I think the carrot has more or less been chewed up, only the stick remains. How the stick can ensure internal stability and peace remains to be seen. That's all I have to say. Over to you, General Shankar.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for extensive covering, comprehensive. I'd like to highlight what you mentioned, that they're no more speaking about peaceful reunification with Taiwan. That's a very significant departure which one sees over the past 1 year, right? And of course, they've been speaking of this high winds and stormy seas and rough seas and clouds and all that. Now, pretty well for the past 2 years. Okay. As this decline takes place, you did mention about their comparison with how to avoid a USSR collapse. In fact, I'd like to point out there are two streams of thought. One is, will China collapse like USSR, or will China get Japanified or Japanification of China? Both these thinking is there, and both these, at some point of time converge. Militarily, while all is said and done, China is in a two-front situation. At this point of time, it is a bit overstretched, stretching as far as Philippines. The way it's operating in the gray zone is fine, but is it balanced is a question mark. Right. And last but not the least, you did make a mention, but I'd like to put it and I'd like to again throw it for people to, I mean, the other panelists to comment. Is Xi Jinping really in control? These are the issues which have come, because what's happening seems to be neither here nor there in terms of the stimulus and everything. It's neither ideologically driven nor economically driven. It's somewhere in between. And when something happens in between, it's almost always bound to fail. Right. With this, I request Antara Goshal Singh. Madam, please, your views on this whole story. Over to you.
Thank you, sir. Am I audible, sir? Am I audible, sir?
Yeah.
Yes, you are.
Okay, great. Thank you for inviting me for this important discussion, and it is really an honor to be a part of this esteemed panel. What I would try to do is to share some internal debates and discussions from China as the country just celebrated its platinum jubilee. So, as we know, the National Day celebrations have been somewhat marred by the controversy over the stock market situation in China. As China's stock market fell after a recent sharp rise, a big debate has been going on in China around the development. In fact, there have been public spats between well-known Chinese economists and private equity tycoons about whether a bull market full of confidence is in the anvil, or this has been just an accidental rebound. Economists with more optimistic opinion have been attacking their opponents, saying that they are not only making people lose opportunity, but are also shorting the Chinese market, economy, and public policies. And they have been accusing them of eating the Chinese people's food and destroying Chinese people's rice bowl. While others who are more pessimistic about the stock market as well as the Chinese economy as a whole, they have been urging people not to be fooled by the market's appearance. This debate between the industry experts is actually reflective of the contradictory views and attitudes that is currently dominating China's financial market. For ordinary investors, the last few weeks have been quite a dilemma. If they listen to the optimists, they are afraid of taking risks. And if they tend to listen to the pessimists, they're afraid of missing opportunities. However, of late, as the A-share market kept falling, investors started complaining bitterly in Chinese internet. Some even demanded that economists and people in the stock market predicting bull markets to be booked for spreading fake news or rumors, causing investors lose their money. Meanwhile, Chinese state media has gone into the defensive. They argue that foreign media is hyping up the situation to criticize Chinese economy. The stock market is not really a barometer of China's economy. A stock market reversal does not mean that Chinese economy is going to go down. Some are even arguing that in the face of uncertain external environment, China should not rush to play out all its card while stabilizing the overall situation, and it should leave enough room for possible changes in the international environment. In the short and the medium term, the international environment facing China seem to have two major uncertainties. First is the direction of the Federal Reserve's monetary policy, and also the outcome of the US election. In China's economic debate, just to give you a glimpse of the major debates that are going on in China on Chinese economy, there seem to be 5 consensus and 3 disagreements. So the first consensus is that there is a risk of increasing downward pressure on Chinese economy. The second consensus is that the real estate industry has been shrinking, and the decline of the real estate industry is the key factor for the economic downward pressure on Chinese economy. Um, the third consensus is that the decline in the real estate industry has brought about derivative shocks, which includes the impact of fiscal decline on the confidence of entrepreneurs. The fourth consensus is that easing and stimulus policies should be increased. And the last point of consensus is that the continued shrinkage and downward trend of China's real estate sector has had a considerable impact on local finances. And now the differences. So the major differences has been that in terms of fiscal stimulus, the question that is doing round is, and also quoting much controversy, is how to distribute welfare to the people, how much to provide financial subsidies to specific groups of people, and which groups are to be considered as specific groups. The second difference, the second discussion or debate, is about how much room does China have for interest rate cuts. The third disagreement is how strong the stimulus should be. Some people are suggesting that the stimulus should be of around 3 trillion to 5 trillion yuan per year for 2 to 3 years, while others are suggesting that it should be around 5 trillion per year for 10 years. Overall, real estate, domestic consumption, and encouraging fertility are the three areas that China is going to focus on going forward. So I'll stop there, and I'm happy to come back on any questions or any comments that you have in the due course. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Tantra. I think you made you hit the nail on the head as far as their economic situation is concerned. Yeah, if you look at, let me just add to what she says, put it in the broader context. This is the third time that the Chinese stock market is having a hiccup, a major hiccup, ever since reform and opening. The first happened when the global financial crisis took place in 2008. Then in 2015, when the Chinese government itself, hyped up the market, and then it failed. And this is the third one. In the first two cases, the Chinese response was absolutely sure-footed and clear-headed. Whether it was correct or not is a point of other debate, but they did it with absolute political clarity. And I keep repeating, everything in China is political at the end of the day. If you miss the political, you lost the whole story. This time, what comes through is there is political confusion. There's never been a debate in China about this 5 agreements and 5 disagreements or 3 disagreements. It could be small, but overall there was political clarity and the rudder was clearly held, and it is not this thing. And what's interesting about those 5 consensus which came out, what Andra said is, all the 5 consensus point to the fact that China is going down. The 3 debates are how to pull it out, and there's no consensus on that. So that itself tells you where China is at this point of time standing. Right? I thought that was a very incisive way of putting things. We'll get back to you later. I now request Professor Kondapalli. Sir, it's all yours.
Thank you very much for hosting this discussion, timely discussion. The fellow panelists and the viewers, a very good evening to all of you. I think the introduction has already been made about the 75th anniversary speech. So I would have a brief intervention in regard to what this speech content is, as well as the context for the speech as such. As you know, the President Xi Jinping has made a speech on the eve of the 75th anniversary of the People's Republic of China. Previously, they held the 100th anniversary of the Communist Party in 2001. And in 2027, the PLA 100th anniversary is due, and that has been tagged to the Taiwan invasion scenarios. And there is also the 2001 identified as Well-off Society creation anniversary by 2021. So these anniversaries are important features in Chinese political system, symbolic in nature mainly. Um, but this speech didn't had much of policy. Policies are laid down at the Communist Party Congress. The previous one was the October 2022 20th Party Congress, which had laid down for the next 5 years what should be the policy, broad policy, and they keep tweaking based on the ground reality. So the speech by President Xi Jinping didn't have much policy inputs. Nevertheless, it shows to a certain tone that could influence the next March National People's Congress legal and other resolutions, also in terms of the economic policy. So that is the broad tone of the speech, number one. Number two, the overall aspects of the speech is that it is not a very optimistic assessment, as the two previous speakers have already mentioned. But this is also in line with the 20th Party Congress tone on security. There is a very paranoid kind of assessment in the 20th Party Congress, and that continues even now at the 75th anniversary speech by President Xi Jinping. The second aspect is, of course, President Xi had reiterated about the strong country, um, uh, meaning thereby about security aspects, but also about the economic development, rapid economic development. Now, as you know, the National People's Congress this March had laid down 5% growth rate, roughly. Previous year, about 5.5%. And during the COVID year, there was a 3%, 3.3% growth rate. So the problem for China is how to maintain. And this is a very crucial problem for China because in Tiananmen Square massacre and following the Chinese Communist Party's announcement, they mentioned about economic growth rates as key for controlling the social stability issues. So the deal between the Communist Party and the people is to maintain economic growth rates, which have actually fallen from nearly 14% in the mid-90s to that of 10% in 2010, and during the COVID years to 3%. And now they are estimating that to be around 5%. The GDP figures are important also because according to the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, for every 1% decline in growth rates, there are 8 million unemployed. And as I just mentioned, there is a substantial decline in growth rate, which means that there is a huge, almost 40 to 50 million unemployed in the last 10 years. And China produces nearly 7 to 8 million graduates a year. And so this issue is a big problem for China because in democracies, you can throw away any party and bring in a new system. But in the case of China, as Jan Shankar mentioned, there is going the Soviet way, because in Soviet Union, the CPSU collapsed first and then the Soviet Union. So this is a big issue for China in order to maintain growth rates. So that is the key feature also in this speech, that they that President Xi suggested to maintaining the economic growth rate. The other aspect at the broader level is the core of the party in exercising the overall leadership. And since 2018 amendments to the party constitution, she has been elevated to the core, and he had become the center for all the party-related activities. An Australian scholar mentioned about the centralization of powers and said that Xi Jinping has become chairman of everything. So this is the key feature and mentioned in the speech as well about the upholding core role of the party in exercising overall leadership. This is the most important aspect, which under Xi's second term has been intensified. And this is important for those who have watched the visuals in the 20th Party Congress of how former president and a mentor of Xi Jinping, who was ushered out from the hall of the Communist Party Congress. President Hu Jintao was removed from the hall. So that indicates that there is actually a lot of tension. And this video suggested to actually Hu Chunhua being removed from the 25-member Politburo. Instead, we only have now 24-member Politburo. And that was the tussle between the leaders at that point of time. So this is another aspect that Xi reiterated in his speech. At the strategic level, also, there is the Chinese-style modernization, which was emphasized. I think we should also pay attention to this because China is trying to say that its modernization efforts are different from the Western-style modernization efforts. And this is going to be the China model. And this China model will be exported to other countries. So this has been mentioned previously in 2021 initially, and then now has been parroted out in various party documents. So Chinese-style modernization is the new watchword in terms of the Chinese posturing to the rest of the world. And also, in order to counter the Soviet-type disintegration, the Chinese-style modernization would help China in circulating its image in the rest of the world. So this is the key feature, I think, since 2021, for the past 3 years, that has been the major effort. So the overall speech, of course, is pessimistic. There were no major military exercises as the previous speeches used to have. And so this is kind of not a very spectacular event from the optics point of view. The other is, of course, as the three interventions before mentioned, about the stormy seas, unpredictable risks and challenges, preparing for rainy days, potential dangers and be well prepared, vigilant in times of peace, planning ahead, so on and so forth. All these indicate to the pessimism aspect of the, and of course, it is also a fact that because of the recent events in Israel, Palestine, Israel, Iran, Ukraine, Russia war, and other events, technological disruptions. So this is also a fact of the matter that Xi Jinping has been mentioning in terms of the pessimism that is reflected because of the growth rates decline and others, as is mentioned. The third aspect I wanted to highlight was on the economy, which Antara had already done. There, the speech mentions about two great miracles, rapid economic development and social stability. As I mentioned before, in Tiananmen Square, this was the promise made by the Communist Party to its people. And rapid economic growth is actually declining. And long-term social stability issues are also becoming a major concern because while the premier of the state council used to give a figure some 10 years ago of mass incidents, and these were nearly 2 lakh such mass incidents. A mass incident is anything where a demonstration of more than 1,000 people. So each of these incidents is a mass incident, and 2 lakh 56,000 was the last count made in 2010. But some suggest Tsinghua University and other surveys indicate to nearly 9 lakh such mass protests in China. So that suggests 900,000. That suggests the social stability issues are again a major problematic. This is in terms of the unemployment that we mentioned. For every 1% of growth rate decline and other social welfare benefits, pensions removal, the tuition fee, electricity fee, all these increasing after the market economy spread in China since 1978. Finance Minister Lan Fuan did mention in a press conference about the helping of the local governments to tackle the debt issues. But there is no mention about how much exactly is this the bailout package. They have done that in 1997 Asian financial crisis, in 2008 global financial crisis. They have spent a lot on the infrastructure, but this time there is no ballpoint figure that is mentioned by the finance minister. So this is still a problematic. Of course, what they are planning to lay down, they wanted to probably help the local governments to stand on their feet because the debt issues have actually increased substantially at the local level. So there is some rumor about sovereign bonds of nearly $284 billion worth of fiscal stimulus, but this has not yet been official. So that is also taxing the financial issues and so on and so forth. The PMI is actually not very high in the recent past in China. This is generally hovering around 50 or even below 50 points. And so the factory orders and circulation, distribution, logistics, all these are actually a big issue in China today, which means the economy is still a major factor. That would also keep the Communist Party on its toes for some time to come. And one would have expected a figure coming out in the stimulus packages, but not much has been. So this is kept hanging in overall. Finally, I would say about the Taiwan issue, which has already been highlighted by two speakers. One country, two systems has been reiterated. And President Xi mentioned that this is an irreversible trend and a matter of justice. And he said, no one can stop the march of history. This comes also in the light of the Biden administration providing aid, military aid to Taiwan, and the new government under Lai Ching-te assuming charge this May. And there is the, since Nancy Pelosi's visit a couple of years ago, there has been a lot of activity in the Taiwan Straits. So this is being ratcheted up. The Taiwan Defense Ministry is every day it comes out with a bulletin which mentions on an average about 20 to 25 fighter aircraft transports, elite, and other naval vessels as well coming closer to the Taiwan Straits. So this is really unnerving, but this is one of the main factors of that. Even though there is no specific Taiwan independence movement so far that we have seen, Lai Ching-te or his predecessor, Dr. Tsai Ing-wen, they have not given any visible signs of Taiwan independence. So this looks like more Chinese ratcheting up than the Taiwanese provocation. But this issue also has implications for India because although the speech did not mention anything about India, there is the two defense ministries announced in February 2021 about de-escalation and disengagement in all friction points. That has not been done so far. That indicates that the Taiwan-related rhetoric will also be transposed on the India-China border areas, and we should be prepared for contingencies on the border areas. So let me thank the Lieutenant General Shankar and Lieutenant General Moorthy for giving me this opportunity.
Thanks a lot, sir. Your intervention was very appropriate, and you laid out very significant issues. If I can recount the very important part of the story, is that the overall mood is pessimistic, which is quite opposite of what it was, say, before the 20-party Congress. Ever since the 20-party Congress, like you rightly said, it is security-dominated, high seas and strong winds. The important part of the correlation between the GDP and the social contract with the people and what's happening down below is very critical, because China is a GDP-obsessed nation. And it is here that China faces the danger. In having declared the GDP, they have to achieve it, whether they, at least on paper, whether they actually achieve it or not. And the real fact which comes out over a period of time, if you correlate the unemployment overall, is that there's a slip between what is said and what is actually being achieved. And the way they've tampered with their own unemployment figures, because last year they suddenly stopped publishing those figures. After 3 months, they published it. In fact, if I remember it, from 21%, they brought it down to 14% unemployment. And now that has gone up over the just 1 year period. It has gone back up to 19%. Virtually, if you take that 7% up over that, you're looking at something of about 30% unemployment, which is quite scary, right? And you put up with this together with other things, it gives its own picture. That's the increase in mass protests, which you say, you correlate that, then a lot of things fall in place, right? And their idea to export their model to others, their idea is not only to export their modernization model, it's also their government model, governance model, and ultimately the Chinese form of communism, right? And of course, like I rightly said, you reiterated, there's no specifics on the bailout, and there's no specifics on the bailout because I suspect that the political consensus on this is not there, and that's what Antra also did mention about the whole affair. And the timely thing which you said is about the Taiwan rhetoric being transposed to the Indian, environment and being transposed to the LAC, I think is a live danger. With this, I'd request General Rakesh Sharma to focus on issues which he's, quite up on, and I'm sure he'll focus on the security situation. All yours, sir.
Thank you, General Shankar. Then thank you, General Moorthy, for inviting me. And I've heard all four of you. I have nothing to add, and I can rest my case, sir.
That's not correct.
Okay. So when I got this subject, I asked myself three questions. Is China taking time bomb? Because it's the second largest economy. It is the largest manufacturing powerhouse. It has got the maximum trade with more than 130 countries in the world. Is it a ticking time bomb? Will it collapse in any form? And will that collapse lead to global collapse? Because it is a global manufacturing powerhouse. It will cause global recession and global inflation because all of these countries are dependent on China, including India. And will the West allow China to go under? First question I want to ask myself. Second, as question raised by Professor Kondapalli, who is a dear colleague from IDSA days, will it lead to mass unrest? I follow this figure of nearly 3 lakh odd protests of 1,000 people each who gather together, but there is no shooting, no firing, no patthar throwing. It's not a protest of the kind that takes place even in India. So these are protests, all right. They get together, they put armbands and they go away. But they are protests, all right, and they're significant. Will it lead to mass social unrest in China? And third question which I ask myself is that will that lead to a security situation? As I've always said, I hate the formulation called friction points. I think we grossly underplayed what happened on the line of actual control by calling it friction points and using it mellowed down terminology meant for public consumption, which actually does not exhibit what exactly happened on the line of actual control. So I start with these three parameters. First point, I don't think the Sensex is any barometer of Indian strength and Indian weakness. And I don't think any one of these Chinese indices is a barometer of what's happening in the nation, especially among people. 10% people invest into stock exchanges in China. 70% people invest in stock exchanges in the United States. So if the Dow Jones gone down, that affects the whole country. But if the stock markets in Shanghai or any one of these other stock markets go down, it's only 10% people who are the HNIs who invest into the stock exchanges. Large percentage of people, correct me if I'm wrong, invested in real estate. That matters much more than the stock exchange does. First point. Second, now is China trying to dig itself out of its hole by these two packages, stimulus packages that it had released? The one which came up in the end of September, a trillion yuan package, in addition to many other issues which China had also brought about, like, for example, lower interest rates, monetary policy changes, reserve ratios for banks were reduced. So the package which came, the stimulus package that came out in end of September was not 1 trillion yuan alone. It had many other issues to facilitate buying capacities of the people of China. And then how much effect that has had takes a long time. United States, if you go back to 2008, gave $1 trillion package to take out their own country out of the mess they had gone into 2008. We are talking about 1 trillion yuan, which is 1/4 of. So, and the United States took nearly 10 years to get out of the mess of 2008. Now, the point is, will exports, which is the mainstay of China, help China get out of this mess that they have got into? First point, I think, is that stimulus was bold, but more than the stimulus that came, first one, not the second one, which Professor Kondapalli referred to, which came out yesterday. I'm talking about yesterday's stimulus later. The first stimulus that came out, at least now, first time, the Chinese government accepted that they are in trouble. The stimulus said so. It is not the stormy winds, and it's not that the other issues that he raised in 75th speech, but this stimulus package and the entire issues brought about these issues out here. The second part is the stimulus package which came up yesterday, which Professor Kondapalli referred to, is a fiscal stimulus package which the world is waiting for. The monetary package alone, the fiscal package yesterday, and rightly said that they have not quantified it. But having not quantified it, it is appreciated that it was yesterday, it was a $2 trillion package. Now, $2 trillion package, that means total $3 trillion in last 10 days is what the Chinese have pumped into the economy. This second package also includes social welfare, like what we are doing, giving ration to 80 crore people. So they decided to give, say, 700 yuan to every family which has got 2 children and above. So 700 yuan you give to every family, and this money is usable for purchase of white goods, those goods which are household goods. So there is an attempt to get these things right. Now, some statistics are all confusing, and China is opaque, and I don't read Chinese. But except for the 4 larger cities, which is Shanghai and Beijing and Guangzhou and Shenzhen, which are in trouble, which are in serious trouble, there have been positive trends read by many Western economists into the second, third, and the fourth tier cities, where they show that there is a little movement forward, very mild movement, but there is a movement positive coming up from the second, third, and the fourth tier cities. So that needs to be now seen in times to come. I come back to the question I was raising: will exports, which is the mainstay of China, dig China out of this trouble that they have in the economy? Now, the point I want to raise is that exports are just about 20% of Chinese GDP.
Yeah, we'll just wait for him to come back. I think he's got, yeah, there he is. Yeah.
So I won't vanish till the time I get some brick bats here. Okay.
Go ahead.
General Shankar knows me so well. See, they say that there is a change because of EV and solar panels, and the green energy industry will dig China out because they have a downfall in the real estate energy. But the maximum exports that Chinese have been able to do in 1 year on this green energy is only 5%. So the green energy is not going to dig China out of the trouble that the Chinese have got. Their weakness lies into the old industry, which was actually the employment generators. For example, apparel, furniture, cosmetics, household appliances. These have gone down because of a lack of consumer sentiment in this market. And on last 3 years, Chinese have also decided that the cost of manufacturing having gone up, they invested largely in Vietnam, in Malaysia, in Cambodia, in Laos, and Indonesia. So their industry has migrated across to other countries to do the same kind of production and give them the same kind of revenues without the larger expenditure of the heavy labor market which is coming to China. So then there is they have tried to remodel the high manufacturing industry costs that they were having inside in the problem. So then of course there are issues now. Europe, for example, the Volkswagen boss came up day before yesterday, said the European Union putting 35% tariffs on EVs is a poor idea. The company that's going to suffer in Europe is going to be Volkswagen, Mercedes, and BMWs, because China will put the similar tariff, which China has already done, put tariffs against the cars which Germany was selling across to China. Germany is the powerhouse, financial powerhouse of European Union. So there is a quid pro quo on, and games are being played despite all pressure the United States and European Union is putting across on tariffs and non-tariff barriers. Every month there are financial delegations of United States and European Union visiting China, and there is no reciprocity. Chinese are not sending them. These people are sending. Actually, the Americans have got billions and billions of investment out there. India, we had Apple, shabash Apple. The Apple factory got burned recently in India. We had to go back to China to start producing those, getting those same items which were being produced in India, because that factory got burnt in Bangalore. The fact is that finally the major issues, these countries will have to rely back on the Chinese, and to allow the Chinese to go totally under, the American economy will be the first one to be hit because of the kind of dependence that they have grown across in with that on China. Now, I would like to say that there are serious problems in China on economy, which Chinese have acknowledged, and whether President Xi, somebody said, does he believe there is a problem or not? Does he not believe there's a problem or not? Does he believe the problem will go out on its own? Does he believe he has to intervene? Finally, all questions have been answered. He has intervened, whether he likes it. He's not an economist, but he likes it or not, he has intervened. And how much of this intervention will go in future and what effect it will have, I think it is premature. United States took a long time to get out of Lehman Brothers and all the problems that those countries have had. So that's one part of the issue, is that I would like to give Chinese a little time to say whether it will recover or not, or it will decouple. Decoupling is out, de-risking is also out. Look at what happened to Australia. Finally, the Australian Prime Minister went to China and said, "Yaar, humse galti bhayo." Like we say in Gurkhali, na, galti bhayo. Yeah, we have done a mistake. Please allow us to start doing trading again. That FTA, which they signed in 2015, China and Australia, in 2021, the Chinese set 200% tariffs on all items of that FTA: sorghum, beef, coal, barley, wines, everything 200% tariff. The Australian economy went fat. This year, the Australians have gone back and said, okay, we will back out of all the issues that we are raising on COVID. And the Prime Minister signed back, and the FTA of 2015 is back. Otherwise, Australian economy had gone down terribly because of the 200% tariffs that the Chinese had laid against Australians. So there is a game being played among many countries, and Chinese having now gone into industry in Southeast Asia in a big way. How do things come out in times to come? I think I'll take a little time deciding, and I think it will not be. It will be slightly too early to give out saying that it's a ticking time bomb or it's collapsing totally. Will there be a social unrest? Well, that's an issue, and Professor Kondapalli is rightly pointed out. There are problems here, serious problems, and they lie down and lie up, whatever they say. There is whether it is 24% youth unemployment, not 24%, or now they say 18%, 19% unemployment, which is youth unemployment, 15 to 29 years unemployment. That's a critical issue which Chinese have to attend, and that issue doesn't come back by modern industry, because modern industry, which is EVs and solar panels, don't help. It is the traditional industry which provides unemployment, which helps out. Now, how do Chinese get across to sort that out is a mess that they have to plan for after a long time. So there is a corresponding effect on global slowdown worldwide. And one small issue, in the recent summit that happened between African 50 head of states and China, very interesting, the Chinese decided to give $50 billion to African head of states. And largely this $50 billion, which is over a period of 5 years, is given to buy consumer goods from China. So while their own consumer industry is not doing so well, they are all, pushing other nations that we will give you loans of $50 billion, you buy consumer goods from us. And there are competitive. So there are other methods being found by the Chinese to sort out this issue here. Second, social unrest, of course, that time will tell. Presently, we don't know how things are panning out or happening in the Chinese. I'll take a wager on the security situation. Now, the fact of the matter is that the Chinese did not come on 6 friction points. They came over a frontage of over 700 kilometers, and they denied us patrolling on the entire plateau, something which was being done earlier. I have written this. I've been quoted even by Manoj Joshi on these issues on this one. The fact is that these 2 friction points, if we talk about the friction points, are not friction points. Dem Chowk has been a problem area for a very long time. As a youngster, I was a BJ Sops in Northern Command. It was always a problem area, Dem Chowk. Why? Because of a patrolling to a pass called Chardingla. Chinese hated the idea of us going to Chardingla, because from there you could have a clear day vision right up to Mansarovar Lake. So they would not allow us there. Now, to say that there can be a reconciliation and go back to Depsang, the patrolling that we were doing till 2019 into the Depsang Plateau, which is part of Aksai Chin, has been denied to us in this now game here. There's an article published in the United States. And God alone knows, we never clarify. We don't know what's happening in discussion, so I don't know. But I read the article which said now the Chinese have asked for 9 to 15 kilometers of buffer zone in Depsan. Now, this is a American media. Truth, we don't know. Our people don't tell us, and we don't know. Now, if it is 9 to 15 kilometers, he's bringing us down to Burse, right to the base, which is their 59 claim line. If this is what they want to do, meaning to say, will 2013, after the 22-day standoff happened, and we were able to do something quid pro quo, and things changed and it called off. We were patrolling again into that area. Will Chinese allow us to re-patrol the areas where they have already established some kind of garrisons and some kind of posts in that area, which we used to patrol earlier? Now those are available on satellite imagery. So will they say, okay, that time 2019 those things were not there, but 2024 those things exist? Will they say, okay, we relent on it? What they will do, okay, have a buffer of 5 kilometers, and we will say disengagement has been carried out. So it's a question of disengagement, and disengagement implies two more buffer zones being created without allowing us to do what we were doing pre-2020, which doesn't mean that there is peace on the border. Today, are we in peace? I don't even like the word of gray zone. I think we have bashed word gray zone so hard, one doesn't even know what is gray zone and what is black and what is white. What happened in Eastern Ladakh was not gray zone, because this was actual occupation of areas that we were patrolling earlier, which is like territorial encroachment. And territorial encroachment is not gray zone by any manner. And if you pump in lakhs of people ahead, and the Chinese pump in so many people ahead, and they are face to face to each other, is that gray zone in that altitude, in that kind of weather and temperature? It's as black can get. It is nothing gray about Eastern Ladakh at all. Similarly said to the other areas on the central sector, 18-19 passes in the central sector, and all those passes in the eastern sector, and all the areas of eastern sector. Some of the areas were tapped also. Some are in common knowledge. Zhang say many may not be in common knowledge. Fact is that the Chinese understand today that hereafter any encroachment implies war, because the troops are on ground and dug in and holding on to ground. So even if it's a Arunachal Pradesh or any other area, it will be tantamount to escalation, because we are holding areas to that strength. So that is escalation. If the Chinese have a game plan of, because of the internal situation or whatever, to do further encroachment or territorial issues out here, that will tantamount to a situation which gets escalated, which may be out of control. Because and no Chinese government, they are pragmatic people, they think far away, will go ahead and establish a game plan or an end state which is not achievable. Because victory in such matters is controversial, it's a nebulous issue. To say dare to win, fight to win, all the terminology is being used by President Xi to his PLA troops. Fight to win, fine, but win what? What is victory? What is the end state? In Russia, in Ukraine, in the first initial onslaught, went across to Kyiv. In 40 days, they knew Kyiv and Sumy were out of, and Cherkiv was out of its control. It withdrew the forces back. They were the end state. They faulted on the end state and moved the forces backwards and concentrated now on a narrower front of 1,000 kilometers instead of 2,000 kilometer frontage. This is a 4,000 kilometer frontage. It's easier said than done. That what can be, what future will foretell here. But I'd say that I absolutely agree that China is still dissatisfied as far as the line of actual control is concerned, and dissatisfaction, understanding fully well that to proceed further will tantamount to escalation to a next level of warfare, may or may not attempt to do so, because here we are prepared and here we have strength to fight high altitude. We are masters in high altitude, from Haji Pir to 1948 Pir Kanti to Haji Pir Pass to Kargil Heights. We are masters here and we can fight it out. So border is one issue. Many other ways the Chinese can do trouble to us economically or on trade front or tariff or whatever the many other political fronts, United Nations or Human Rights Forum and many other places Chinese can cause trouble to us or the Indo-Pacific, that is more likely than to say in the immediate future attempting to tap our doors on the line of actual control. I'll rest here and take the
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks a lot. You gave out a very clear picture of the security situation. But before that, your viewpoint is that it's too early to say which way China will go in terms of the stimulus and what will be the outcomes. I fully agree. It's too early. But at the same time, there is a very clear unanimity. In fact, it's not unanimity. There's pretty clear that the stimulus itself has come too late. And like you rightly said, their exports won't dig them out of that hole, right? And the hole which they've created is the 30% of the real estate, which will also not go away. So they are in a terrifically bad situation. Those protests at this point of time, they might be this thing, but then China is China. If you see the history of China, there are issues which keep happening in China every 100 years, 200 years. You know, if you read Chinese history, things are of a different thing. But then, like you rightly said, it's only time which can tell. It's their internal problem with no one to help them. And their external problem is not being helped, but apart from everything else which you said, by the fundamental factor, the buying power of many nations to whom they sell is not very great due to the wars which are going on. So that's going to have an effect on China. And if China goes down, it's going to affect all of us is a foregone conclusion. Now, as far as your assessment of the LAC and the border is concerned, I go completely with you. We are actually at this point of time, we are both in a situation where we are dissatisfied. Both of us are dissatisfied with this standoff which is going on across the board. And both of us are, I don't think, are in a position to take it to a logical conclusion to satisfy each other. How this will play out is a matter of, how strategic games which will be played. It is dependent on a lot of things. Whether our government has a political acumen to sort this out politically is the issue. Because, like I said, I have always believed when you deal with China, you don't deal with it militarily or economically, you deal with it politically. If you're not able to deal with it politically, you're out of the game. Right. With this, we've had some fantastic ideas coming in. I'll take a few questions. I'll not take too many. I'll take a couple of questions and then we'll wrap it up. Because I think we've covered a lot of ground as far as where China is. Okay. There's an interesting question which says, sir, the purging of senior military officers at the Chinese CMC and its various armies continue unabated. What effect would such actions by Xi have on the morale of fighting formations? I'd like to add, yesterday only, there's one PLA-RF rocket scientist again who's been sacked. And if you take the sum total, there are about 20 guys who've been sacked in this whole story. Professor Kondapalli, your view.
Thank you very much for that question. I think the first one to have been sacked was some 10 years ago. Ko Po-xiang, the CMC vice chairman, was removed, and then General Xu was removed again. Also, he was part of the CMC, Central Military Commission. Xu Cai-ho was removed. Then Ku Chin-kun, General Ku Chin-kun, he was the General Logistics Department Deputy Director. He was removed for corruption as well. Xu Cai-ho was removed with the charges of, his daughter getting something like 20 million renminbi debit card from someone. And Ku Chin-kun, his house was searched. They found some 17 truck loads of gold biscuits, hard currency, liquor, and various other contraband items. 17 truckloads. That was the level of corruption in the PLA. Then, of course, last year or so, the following General Lee, the defense minister, Li Shangfu, he was removed again on charges that his son was involved in some space program related corruption. And this is also coinciding with Chin Kang, the foreign minister, who was removed. So the rocket forces chief and the political commissar have also been removed last year. And this is in conjunction with the controversy related to the rocket fuel, which was used in the uh, celebrations in the military barracks. So there was a number of these who were removed, and this is basically to keep the PLA in track and bring back the combat related activities. During Chiang Zemin's time, there was the commercialization of the defense industries, and many of these industries were put up for sale for the civilian, including even foreign and indigenous bidders. Even though it was banned in 1998, this program of privatizing the assets or commercialization, that process still continues, and this has affected also the combat duties of the PLA soldiers and officers. So she is targeting primarily for this reason, but there are also other reasons because many of these officers are part of the Chiang Zemin, Hu Jintao political factions. So there is a factional struggle also behind the corruption related charges. The third consideration, of course, is Xi also wants to bring in his own cronies into the PLA. And he had actually brought in Li Shangfu, previously the rocket forces chief as well, but they found to be problematic, and so he removed them. These are actually appointed by Xi Jinping himself in the 20th Party Congress, but many of them have been removed. So this is the third reason. Fourth, of course, is the leadership wanted to usher in a new pattern within the PLA because of the kind of scenarios they visualize: Taiwan, South China Sea, Senkaku Islands, and the India-China border areas. So this is, they think that the PLA forces are not geared up effectively for this. For example, while Chinese military has been deployed in the Tibet region, there were about 58 incidents of casualties because of the high altitude or other related matters. On the other hand, India did not witness any casualties except for that truck which fell into the gorge some time ago, last year. Other than that, we have not seen any casualties in the Indian side. So this is one indicator for the PLA to buckle up and enhance the combat capabilities. On the main question, whether these actions affected the morale of the fighting formations, yes, it did in many ways, because these officers are at very high ranking level. And even though many generals were removed, 200 generals, for example, were removed because they are not really capable of doing the local war under informationized conditions. in terms of high-tech equipment and learning about these matters. So 200 generals were removed in a demobilization process some years ago by Xi Jinping. So all of these actually have affected the morale of the fighting formations in the PLA. And the 2021 integrated joint operations target has not yet been met in the PLA. They have initiated this in 2015, but that has not yet been met. Both mechanization and informationization have also not been met so far. So this suggests that there is some more reorganization required, and morale is one factor in this.
Thanks a lot. I think that was quite good. Really speaking, my own view is that the PLA is not what it appears to be. It is far more hollow than what it is, because you don't sack 200 top generals and then expect the whole morale of the people to be good. That's as simple as that. You don't expect them to fight. And 55 casualties in a year in high altitude is phenomenal. In our scenario, if we suffer one or two the second, third casualty, the commander is shaky. He's put on notice, and I'm sure General Rakesh will tell you that a little later. I mean, he'll vouch for what I've said. That was good. Yeah, now we'll take the second question. Dictatorship always explodes from inside. Timings no one can predict. This may ultimately happen in China in due course. Antara, take a shot at it, because you've seen inside China far more.
Sir, sir, hello. Am I audible?
Yeah, you're
Yes.
audible.
I missed the last part of your question, sir. Can you please repeat it?
Yeah, the last part of the question is dictatorships always explodes from inside. Timings no one can predict. This may ultimately happen in China in due course. So your views, just take a shot at it, I said.
Okay, so I agree actually with my other respected co-panelists that it might be too early to predict China's economic collapse or something like that. Yes, there are downward pressures on Chinese economy, but I think Chinese government also has a number of tools in its hand to deal with it. So it might be too early to talk about economic collapse and people a resistance coming from people. So that I do not see it happening right now, or how the discussions are going on in China. If I look at the domestic public opinion, it is not at that point. But yes, if the economy, as General Shankar also mentioned, that China's legitimacy, the legitimacy of the CPC comes from economic performance. So if this continues for a long time, then probably we can see a marked difference in how people are reacting to it. And also, to understand the public opinion, the Chinese public opinion on what is happening politically at China, it is very difficult to gauge, because their internet is highly censored, and there is very little you can see, very little criticism about the about Xi Jinping or other political leaders. So from that perspective, it remains somewhat of a black box. But I agree that if this condition continues for a long time and there is no respite, then probably we can think of a situation like that.
Yeah, I think you're completely right on this, and your assessment is also fine. I'm reminded of what Ernest Hemingway once said in one of his books. Right? He says how he was asked. This part of this book. In this book, the thing goes, how do you go bankrupt? So the chap says, the protagonist says, two ways. The first way is slowly, and the second way is suddenly. So when the slowly finishes, the suddenly can happen. And that's how the whole thing happens.
Yes.
So we don't know what's going to happen in China on this score. Okay, and I'll quote this again tomorrow, because that I think is one of my most favorite quotes. When I study China, I always keep Ernest Hemingway in view. Okay. The next question is to General Rakesh. Sir, he says, of course, salute and all that, fine. The last question, when China is facing issues, why are they financing Pak? And what are the difficulties in it? I put it this way, that they're going through a tumultuous relationship. I'm bringing in this in because I think there is a correlation between this and our whole security situation. And Rakesh, sir, all yours.
So, how much is the total debt that the Chinese have? So, say somebody say 116% of GDP. Now, if you say the total debt Americans have a $25 trillion economy, they have a debt of $35 trillion already. They are wanting to go again to Congress to take money. So the debt as percent of GDP, most countries, we ourselves have a debt about 80% of GDP. So the barometers change as countries change. Now, the issue is that they are making $100 billion advantage on trade every year, every month. Sorry, 100 billion. See, between 90 and 99 billion dollars in the month of June. That was a positive that they got on trade, and now they are not investing across in United States bonds. This money is being surplus, being sent to Bahamas or Cayman or wherever it is going across. They have money. They have problem internally because there are no jobs and people are villa people is a problem. That's a you don't know how to handle all those issues. Pakistan is a low cost option to keep India busy. If there is one tiger on a mountain, and one tiger on a mountain means China, and you can't have two tigers on the same mountain. You yourself have been saying this, General Shankar, off and on. I keep hearing your tigers on the mountain regularly. I'm a great student of your shows nearly every day. So if there is one tiger on a mountain and one great power in the Asia, or maybe two great powers in the world, well, it's very good to have Pakistan being financed so that Pakistan keeps us busy. Despite their economic troubles, they infiltrated well-trained people south of Peer Panjal in month of May this year and had forced us to do recalibration of forces in month of July, August, and September. Very low cost option. Why should the low cost option be left alone here? So I am convinced that Pakistan is a conduit to keep India busy, as other conduits are there. So it suits them well. The other part is that there are 1,500 odd Chinese in Pakistan now working in the BRI 2.0. BRI 2.0 is more innovative in nature than BRI 1.0. This 1,500, they have in 5-6 incidents. They have happened near the airport. It's happened in the embassy and the consulate. So there are serious issues here. Now they have arm twisted Pakistanis last week or 10 days ago, just before the attack, and Aurangzeb came on TV to say that, look, I am giving 50 billion, how much rupees, only to protect the Chinese who are working in Pakistan. It is more than the defense budget. That's the kind of money Aurangzeb is allotting. Aurangzeb is their finance minister. That's the kind of money Aurangzeb is allotting across to protect the Chinese projects and Chinese people. Why? Because, well, it's a kind of dependence. This $7 billion IMF loan is just one small part of the entire thing, because 5 billion is coming from China, 5 billion coming from UAE, and also from Saudi Arabia, which are allied advantages coming across to Pakistan because the IMF have cleared the loan across to them. So, when it is a total basket of it. IMF is one issue, and IMF is given only one point something to Chinese, but the Pakistanis, but Chinese and Saudis and UAE have said, okay, we will release our tranches across there. So overall, I think the attempt is to put Pakistan out of the trouble that Pakistan have. And I think, major professors who study great power politics and tragedy of great powers and rise and fall of great powers, they always say that if there is a rising power, attempts must be made to pull it down. Which is a rising power?
India.
You said
That's
it.
simple. Yeah, there's no doubt. And it's my theory. It's my theory. Let me add to what you said that India is a power which has to rise against all odds. We'll not have China, America backing us like America backed Japan, Germany, or China, right? We'll not have a peaceful rise like China had for the past 50 years. We've always have to fight through our wars. But that's our strength. The way I look
And,
at it, that's our
and
strength
let me
also.
put one more thing. See, the Americans became a developed country, the UK became a developed country. They became developed countries as dictatorships, not as
Yes,
democracies. They
yes.
became democracies after they got developed.
After becoming, yeah.
House
So,
of Commons, I think, came up in 1911, 1912, something like that. The fact of the matter is, we have started 1947 as a democracy, a cacophony of a democracy. For us to rise is even more difficult because of the state we are developing in. While you can't compare, and they who are selling democracy to other countries is
others
actually, there was no black franchise, there was no women franchise in America till 60s, yeah.
in 60s, yes. 64.
Yeah.
But no, I that's where I feel the internal strength of our country is that we will go against odds. We'll rise slowly
Yeah.
but steadily. We'll rise. No one can stop us. Right. The last question, which is from General Dushyant Singh, I must take it. And Gautam Moorthy, so all yours. Will China follow the principle of one country, two system if Taiwan gets assimilated, as no reference was made to peaceful unification of Taiwan in the 75th anniversary celebration? You're muted, sir.
This is a very interesting question. I said if China knows what's good for it, and it has seen Hong Kong uh, recently, and if you look at Hong Kong was actually following the one country, two systems approach after its unification with the mainland, after the British left, the lease got over, and Chris Patten left. We saw what had happened. And recently, what has happened after Xi Jinping has come in and is consolidated his power. There are no freedoms in Hong Kong. There's freedom only to make money. So, to that extent, yes, but there will be no political freedom. Now, if Taiwan gets assimilated, and General Dushyant has asked a very sensitive question, but no reference was made to the peaceful unification of Taiwan. I take it that Xi is looking at military unification of Taiwan. As the professor very clearly brought out, 2027 is what they are looking at. That gives you just 3 years. The US, in my opening remarks, I mentioned, is absolutely distracted with the Ukraine war. They're pouring money into it, Ukraine-Russia war. They are going to get involved more deeply in the Middle East and their own personal issues, internal issues. So, is this giving China a green signal? Is China looking at this window to take advantage of it? And if they do, will the US, will AUKUS, will Quad, will all these rise up? Quad, we all know, is not a security alliance. That's very clear. But what will happen? All bets are off over here, General Dushyant. I cannot give a frank answer to this because I frankly do not know which way it is going to go. But unlikely that one country, two systems, economic, markets, financial, yes, that will probably happen. But nothing else. Nothing else. Thank you.
But let me add on. If you look at the Hong Kong model, it's already one country, and it's only one system. Right? Politically, it's gone down to one system already.
Yeah, politically, yes. Financially,
It's gone to one. Financially, it will ultimately become. They don't want to make it one country, one system because Hong Kong still remains a conduit. The second system is useful to conduit money. So they're playing it smart, but essentially it's one country, one system. In the case of Taiwan, I don't think they'll give that leeway at all. And especially if they have to take it by force, it's only one country and one system, and because at that point of time there's no question of second system coming in, and that will be the American system. They'll completely try to eject it. Right? That's my view, and it could have a different connotation. But then that's open to debate. With this, I thought for the past 1.5 hours, we've had some fantastic points coming about China, and we need to discuss China more, and we need to, broad base it across many more subjects, for the simple reason, as we are changing, so is China changing, and China is changing very rapidly, and the fount of that change, I keep maintaining it, is their population decline, because the population decline from what is on paper to what is on ground, I think there's a huge difference and in negative. So this country is going to change, and this country, like General Sharma has eloquently put out, we have 4,000 kilometers border with them, and this is going to trouble us. And they are opening out an Indian Ocean region where they're going to trouble us even further. And for reasons best known to our polity, we are even allowing investments from there into this. So
I
we're
can
going
add
to
a
have
point on
issues. Yeah, please.
same issue which you're raising now. If we follow the economic survey of this year, which stated that there should be opening of FDI and opening of other trade issues with China, and there were a plethora of articles published subsequently as to say that for India to rise to $5 trillion and $10 trillion economy, and because the subsidiaries of most of the exports that we do come from China, and if we have to rely on China to rise up, well, then we have to put issues of the border and of the
On the
tension
back.
of security in a separate basket. We can't
Basket.
forget them, because that will happen separately. Where the Taiwanese trade with China, Japanese trade with China, or Philippines bananas being sold to China are separate issues to the border issues that are happening here. We can't soft pedal the border to sort out the
Yes.
trade.
Yeah, I agree
Good
with you
point.
completely. We have an issue at hand, and I think our policy with China as a whole, uh, from a 360-degree viewpoint, has to be taken, and that is probably the most important thing. I'd like to thank all the panelists for this wonderful discussion.
Antara wanted to say
And
something. You can't
yeah,
deny
please.
her the right. She's a professor.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Sir, I couldn't get.
So one small thing, sir.
Yeah, yeah,
We
please,
are
please.
sorry, sir. We
Yeah,
are
yeah, go
thinking
ahead.
that we can benefit from China will help us to rise to a $5 trillion economy or something. But I think there is huge domestic resistance to China investing in India. It is the resistance is not just from India but also from China. So we
China.
should
Yeah,
take that in mind.
yeah.
Because I do not think it's going to happen how we are thinking.
Yeah,
So
valid
Yeah,
that's
point.
I
one
agree
small.
with you. Now that
Valid.
others have spoken, Professor Kondapalli, your view also last view, and then
On General Dushyant Singh's question on whether Taiwan gets assimilated, I think that depends on one, the military prowess of China, uh, and secondly, on the Taiwanese people themselves. We have seen in Russia-Ukraine conflict, it's a bordering country for Russia, yet we are living in the third year of this conflict. Uh, in the case of China, Taiwan, there is a 180 nautical mile moat,
channel.
and this is a geographical nightmare for China if it intends to occupy Taiwan. The second factor is the Taiwanese themselves. 58% of their polling indicated they want status quo, and roughly about 30% for reunification, and the rest not decided or for independence. So, overwhelming Taiwanese are for status quo, and they have not given any indicator for where their direction is. This also creates a lot of problem for other countries on the direction that Taiwan is taking, but definitely not reunification, because that is not the majority of the people in Taiwan want. So it's a very complicated situation.
Yeah. Thanks for your views. Uh, then Moorthy sir, all yours for the final. Thanks.
I think we've had a a marvelous and a really in-depth discussion, starting from Xi's speech, which actually set the ball rolling, to almost covered all aspects of China. The questions were very interesting. I thank you, General Shankar. I thank you, my fellow panelists, General Rakesh Sharma, Professor Srikant Kondapalli, and Ms. Antara Ghoshal Singh for this superb discussion. Thank you, viewers, for your patience. I think we have well exceeded the time, but it was a very, very interesting discussion. Thank you very much. We look forward to your presence in more discussions in future. Thank you.
Eating into drinking time, sir.
Good evening and
That's
Jai
fine.
Jai
Thank you,
Jai
sir.
Jai Hind.
Jai Hind. Jai Hind to all of you,
Jai.
sir.
Jai Hind. Bye-bye. Thank you.